Today's scripture is Luke 21, 1 through 4. As Jesus looked up, he saw the rich putting their gifts into the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 very small copper coins. Truly I tell you, he said, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. It's good to be with you this morning. Michelle, you mentioned the race and the rain, and I think I hit the perfect trifecta. Race, rain, and talking about giving. And yet you're here, and that's great. One of my great pleasures of the work that I do at the Holston Conference Foundation is traveling up and down 75 and 81 and speaking to our churches. And we have approximately close to 900 churches in the conference. And so being out and seeing the work of the Methodist and the community, and especially through our grants program and being able to award grants to, whether it's a ministry to the poor, in Richland Creek or Rich Creek area, up in the Tazewell district, I believe it is, or Big Stone Gap, or if it's a filling the pantry type of a program, which I've been to several of those, or backpack ministry or anything like that. It's such a pleasure to be able to see what Methodists are doing in fulfilling a great commission and also being merciful to others. And that is the topic of my sermon today. But before I get into it, I do want to have a little advertisement for the workshop afterwards. Attendees of the workshop are going to receive our textbook, and I can actually leave some at the church for those of you who cannot make it, called Provide and Protect, which covers important life and death decisions that every individual should face. And so that is free, and I'm going to leave that. And then also we have our personal information record book. And I can tell you the 2 funerals that you had this week, if an individual took the time to complete this or something similar to it, it makes things go a whole lot easier for the service and the way in which that person would like to be remembered. And so we will, I'll leave these for you as well, but if you attend the workshop, then I'll be handing those out to the attendees. So, why did I choose the widow's mite to talk about giving? There are so many scriptures in the Bible that discusses giving. In fact, Jesus spoke on giving and on the treasures that we have more than any other topic in his ministry here, with the exception of maybe the kingdom of heaven. But I love this scripture that talks about giving. The reason why I like it so much is because it really, to me, is a reflection more on the heart of God as much as it is on the widow. And I'll share a little bit about that in a moment. But for us to consider this scripture, I also want to ask you to consider something that I call a working definition of mercy. Mercy is God's supply system meeting every need everywhere. God's supply system meeting every need everywhere. Now, you and I live in an economy of supply systems all around us. You go to the grocery store and they're predicting snow, and so you're with the masses rushing in to get milk and bread, right? Never mind the fact you haven't eaten bread or milk for, it's not that big of a concern until the weather report comes out, right? You go to the gas station today and at the race in the pit, when the cars come into the pit and they have to get gas, right? Well, that gas got there somehow in the gas stations that we use. And so there's a supply system, there's a flow that's occurring that's important. Well, mercy is kind of the same way. Mercy is all around us. In fact, I would challenge you and ask you to consider this week to do something. I want to ask you to consider sitting down in a quiet space and writing down times in your life that you have seen and experienced and even felt God's mercy in your life. I know for me personally, there's a lot that I can reflect upon. It's easy. There's a time when I was in college and I was, I guess, borderline poor. I was a college student. And I was waiting on my financial aid to come in. And there was a lag time there. And rent was due. And it was $200. What I wouldn't give today for $200 rent, to be honest with you. But it was $200. And I was praying about it. And one day I went to my post office box on campus, and in that box was an envelope for guess how much? $200. I still remember it. Bunch of 20s. And that is a time that would go on my list that I knew that God had been merciful to me. So I want to invite you to do that sometime today. Now the widow, back to the scripture, the widow lived in Palestine in biblical times, and there's a lot that we know about the widow. We know that she was a real person. This isn't a parable. This is a real person that I look forward to one day when I get to heaven. I'm going to say, where's the widow? Because I want to talk to her. She was poor. If she was poor during those days, it's very possible. Of course, we know she didn't have a husband. We know she had a husband who was no longer with her. But to be poor in those days, more than likely, she didn't have sons. Because most of the economy of that day was built around what sons and husbands could provide. And I apologize. It's not the way it was. I mean, not the way it is today. Thank the Lord. But back then, that was a big part of it. So she was poor. And if she was poor, since they did not have any kind of social net that we have today, like welfare or Social Security or Medicaid or anything like that, then she probably lived off of the alms of others, the mercy of others who gave to her. And I would imagine that there's a place, I know that there was a place around the temple where the beggars were there. And they would ask for alms. And people would do it because they're going into the temple to worship. And so I would also surmise that she was probably known by the regular temple goers who were there as frequent as they would to go into the temple. And so on this particular day, for whatever reason, and we don't know, and that's one of the questions I'm going to ask her. Why did you choose to go in to be a giver and to be merciful to others? Now, in the temple treasury, which was built behind the walls, and that's where the offering was made, it was all coins, right? They didn't have online giving. They didn't have checks like the one I brought today. So in order to make an offering to the Lord at the temple, or even in the synagogues, out in the highways and byways, you brought coins in. And I can imagine the racket that occurred as it was time to make the offering. Michelle, you did it with the coins in the jar. But imagine that thousands of times louder as they were making their gifts. And I imagine also that God designed it that way for a reason, because He could hear it in heaven. But on that day, the loudest racket to Jesus was those 2 small coins that the widow gave. Now, I already have some opinion about that, and I'm going to ask the widow about it, but one of my opinions or theory on that is that she released all that she had to God on that particular day because she understood mercy. She was a recipient of it. And for some reason, she decided to step into the other side of that supply system and be a giver of it. Now, I think the reason why she did that is because she understood where that mercy came from. And that the next day as she went out broke, because she gave all that she had, she knew that she could expect God's provision to happen because she'd seen it so many times. And you know, folks, to be honest with you, I am not the smartest guy in the room, but I understand that the tithing that they were required to do, half of those coins, 50%, is a little closer to 10% than 100%. Are you with me? And for some reason, she went all in with 100%. You know, she could have done what a lot of people have this theory or this mantra that they live by. Can all you get? No, get all you can all you get, and guard that can. Right? She released that can that day because she knew it would be filled up again at some point. Now, I asked you earlier to consider the list that you're going to write down, I'm sure you are, of those who have been merciful to you or the circumstances in which God has shown His mercy to you. I want to also challenge you to make another list. I want to challenge you to make a list in which you can be merciful to others. Now, there's various ways this can happen, that you can do it. Obviously, you can give. You can give of your resources. You give of your tithe. Give directly to people, as one individual did to me so many years ago. You can pray for somebody. Pray for someone. I actually have a mercy list of people that I am constantly praying for. And I ask God to bless this person. I ask God to show Himself to this person. So you can pray merciful to others. You can spend time with people. The sick, the shut in, the hospitalized, that sort of thing. So I want to challenge you to be merciful to others in any way that God leads you to be a part of that supply system on the other end. I told a story earlier this morning at the first service, and it just made such a huge impression on me individually. I think I met sort of the widow, kind of, recently. I was driving in Knoxville, and my exit that I get off at to go to my house, it has a pretty frequent group of individuals that are standing by the roadside with the cardboard box sign. God bless you, need help, homeless, Nashville bound, you know. And on this one particular exit, there's also a homeless camp of sorts. And in the area that you kind of leave the road and go into the area that has the folks that are staying, and I don't mean they're always there, but it's just this gathering. And you can also see a walker or two. I've even seen a wheelchair parked in the woods. And so I know that oftentimes these individuals will use whatever means to communicate that they have a need, and sometimes, in fact, there's one gal I see all over Knoxville where I'm from, and she's pretty professional at what she's doing. So I'm driving up this exit, and I see a wheelchair, and I'm thinking, okay, there's a gentleman sitting in a wheelchair, and I'm thinking, no. That's not going to affect me. I know that he's probably faking it like others have. And I get closer, and I realize he's missing a leg. And I go, oh, Lord, you got me on this one now, haven't you? You've arrested me with this individual. And then I happen to be that car. You know that car that I'm talking about, right? That car that catches the end of the light and is parked right next to him. And I respond to God's prompt and actually decide to give him some money. And so I roll down my window, and he kind of rolls over. And my heart's hurting because he is in a wheelchair with an amputated leg, and I know that it's real. And you know what he does? As I exchange a couple of dollars to him, he reaches down and he pulls out a hamburger. And he said, "Sir, can I give you this hamburger?" And I said, why would you want to give me this hamburger? And he said, the next car gave it to me. And I'm not hungry. And I would rather it go to someone who's hungry than for me just to throw it on the ground or let it go to waste or anything like that. You see, folks, for that brief moment, he was a steward of mercy in the form of a McDonald's Big Mac. And he was in charge of it. And it was his decision of what to do about it. And he didn't want to waste it. And he said, sir, I've been hungry before, but now I'm stuffed. And sometimes it's harder it's worse to be stuffed than hungry. Please take it. And I said, sir, I'm stuffed too, actually. But I would encourage you to give it to the next car, perhaps. And there was that same spirit of his understanding, I think, that he wanted to bless others even in the want that he had himself. And so I would encourage you again today or this week just to spend some time and asking God, am I stuffed? Do I have a way and a means to make a gift or to be merciful? And I encourage you, if you have a desire to do anything for this church, through an estate plan or anything like that, the foundation exists to sit down with individuals like we did some time ago with Bishop Looney and to talk about how a gift at the foundation for the church in perpetuity can bless this church. And we discuss issues like, what if a church closes or merges or anything like that? What happens to that gift and that fund? And we will steward it for you. And it'll go on to be a legacy for you, for the Methodism and the Christian outreach of this church that it's known for. So I invite you to come to the workshop. If you can't make it, you can reach me at the foundation. You received a brochure on your way in that kind of gives some information on how to reach us. Also details some ideas that maybe you might want to do for this church. And so I thank you.